Well, good morning. I hope your Sunday is off to a good start. Michigan's Attorney General Bill Schuette is visiting Upper Michigan this week, and he set aside some time in his busy schedule to stop by for a conversation with us. It all starts right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Now, here's your host, Don Ryan.
Bill Schuette has a long record of public service, having served as a United States Congressman, Director of the Michigan Department of Agriculture, a Michigan State Senator, and as a judge of the Michigan Court of Appeals. Bill Schuette is the only Attorney General in Michigan history to have served in the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of state government. Attorney General Schuette, welcome back to the Ryan Report.
It's great to be back at the Ryan Report with you, Don, and it's been some time, so I've been looking forward to it. And good morning to you and our viewers.
You were a member of the appeals court, the Michigan Appeals Court, the last time you were here, and kind of gave us a civics lesson about the court was all about. Now you're taking on a new assignment. Glad you could be back to talk to us as the Attorney General. You know, we talked about the fact that you've served in all the branches of government. What impact has that had on your approach to serving as Attorney General?
You know, Don, my calling is service, and that's really how I contribute back to my community and my state and our country. And what I found as Attorney General, my past tours of duty as a congressman, a state senator, a judge on the Court of Appeals, director of the Michigan Department of Agriculture, they've given me a breadth of experience so that when issues come to my plate now as Attorney General, I have vast experience in terms of these different issues, whether it's legislative concerns, criminal concerns, civil areas in the Department of Attorney General. And so it gives me, I've got a leg up, so to speak, and have dealt with lots of these issues. So, sometimes, experience counts, and it really has helped me in my job as Attorney General.
And you have some empathy for those people who serve in the legislature and in the administration as well.
Well, I do, and I understand the motivations and the desires of members of the legislature, and how if you're a governor or a director of the big department of our state of Michigan, how you want to get things done. And what this is all about is, people, I'm the hired man. I'm the Attorney General hired, and I have this privilege to serve as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for the state of Michigan. And they hire me to do a job, to provide solutions, solve problems, nothing more, nothing less. And I'm a no-nonsense guy, and I think people want results, they want solutions. So I understand very clearly my job is to build Michigan, to have big thinking, big solutions for Michigan's future and how we drive our state forward. That's part of my job as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer.
Well, and each, obviously the main responsibilities of an Attorney General are clearly outlined, but each individual, I think, wants to put his imprint on the office. What is your goal as Michigan's Attorney General? What do you hope to accomplish in the operation of that department?
Well, you pose a great question, and a couple of things. Number one, consumer protection. Consumer protection is in the DNA of any Attorney General of Michigan, making sure we fight for consumers, make sure that if there's scam artists out there, that we're providing warning and consequences for folks who want to rip off, whether it's senior citizens or anybody for that matter. And so consumer protection, whether your name is Schuette or Granholm or Kelly or Cox, that's number one. And secondly, what I've learned is that if I'm more on receive instead of broadcast, you can solve problems. So we met with a superintendent from northern Michigan, from the Cadillac area, who said, we need to have a school safety initiative in our state, because she had served as superintendent in the state of Colorado after the Columbine tragedy. And so we took her ideas and made it a Michigan focus, and now we have a school safety initiative called OK to Say. And secondly, I met with some victims of human trafficking, which is where young women are bought and sold in this sex slave market that turns your stomach as a husband, father, citizen, attorney general, doesn't matter what you call it. And by meeting with people, listening, we formed Michigan's first ever Commission on Human Trafficking. So those are important issues, as I'm sure you're aware, these sexual assault kits, these rape kits that have been sitting on a shelf in Detroit. No one did anything about them, and now we're requiring that they be examined so we can provide justice for women who've been victimized by a brutal crime of rape.
One of the responsibilities of the Attorney General is to get involved when some of these nonprofit hospitals are being acquired by for-profit firms. And we've had instances of that here in the Upper Peninsula. What is your objective? What are you looking at when you review these cases?
It's a really good point, because we've seen that both in Marquette and Ishpeming and Houghton Hancock and other areas across the state. And so my job as Attorney General is to make sure that the legal structure of what the purchase price might be, and making sure that there's some foundational dollars that can go to help the charitable responsibilities of the hospital to continue in the future. So we look at everything for the four corners of the document to make sure that we're keeping the interests of the citizens of the area in mind, and also we look to leadership from the local community as well. You don't do this in a vacuum.
With healthcare changing as it is, it appears we're going to see more and more of this happening. Is that how you see the situation?
Well, I think you'll see more and more of that across the nation, and Michigan's part of that, where you'll see certain nonprofit hospitals broaden their scope. We've seen that in our state, and also, as you mentioned, for-profit hospitals, purchasing other hospital concerns that maybe have a fragile balance sheet. So I think you'll see some of the consolidation, but the key thing is to make sure that there's community focus, local control and responsibility. Otherwise, it just doesn't work.
And your responsibilities don't end the minute the deal is approved, does it? You have some continuing oversight?
Well, we do. I mean, for example, with when Duke LifePoint purchased the Marquette Hospital, we work on this issue in terms of the follow-through and the step-by-step in the future, all the time. Same thing as we're looking at the Houghton Hancock acquisition and the Ishpeming as well. So the point is, we have to make sure that things go well for the community. Now, mind you want to make sure that you have a hospital that has the financial legs to have the stamina and sustainability, but you have to have a balance. You want to make sure it's economically viable, but also make sure that the local folks have, the understanding that this hospital is to serve the needs of the local community.
Okay. A lot more to talk about. We'll be back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. We're talking this morning with Michigan Attorney General Bill Schuette. We have a situation in this country. In the past year, we've had a number of cases where police officers have had to use deadly force. We've had community reaction, which is not always positive, as extreme as the riots in Baltimore. Without getting involved in the specifics of those cases, as someone responsible for law enforcement, what are your concerns? Where do you see us heading in this area?
That's a really good question, and I think it's important that people talk about this issue of security, safety, race, and how we integrate all those issues in terms of having communities that are peaceful. And obviously the issue of race is a discussion that everyone needs to have, so that we understand that there needs to be equality, there needs to be opportunity, and when there are racial problems, we need to talk it through. I'm really pleased that at this point in time, the Detroit area there's been a lot of community engagement between law enforcement and leaders in the city of Detroit and the surrounding area. So part of it is discussion, conversation, communication. The other point is, as a chief law enforcement officer for the state of Michigan, I'm a bit dismayed by some of the anti-cop, anti-law enforcement rhetoric that's out there. And what it does is really imperil public safety. I think that there needs to be, whether you live on the fancy side of town or the rough side of town, everybody, and I mean everybody, needs to have safety and security. So if you're a grandparent wanting to take your grandchild in a stroller down a city street or neighborhood, you'd feel safe no matter what part of town you're living. Or if you were getting gas in one place or another, or you're going to the store, there's a sense of safety and security. And who provides that safety and security? That's law enforcement. So I think it's important to have discussion. I think it's important to, and if there are problems and mistakes occur, then there are consequences. I don't care whether you're a police officer or whatever type of profession you might be in. If you break the law or make mistakes, there are consequences, whether that's in Ferguson or Baltimore or any other part of this country. So when mistakes are made, and if it's done by a police officer, indeed, there are consequences. But to have one broad brush that paints in a negative way that the women and men in uniform who are at the tip of the spear, and they occupy a very fragile space between chaos and order. And I have huge regard for the cops, the women and men in uniforms, troopers, sheriffs, who work hard to keep us safe day in and day out. And so from my standpoint, I'm going to stand with the women and men in uniform who are cops and law enforcement officials to make sure that they know I have their back.
And of course, deadly force is nothing to take lightly, but you know, are we going to reach a point in this country where this debate could have a negative effect on police officers doing their duty? Obviously, they have to make decisions in a split second, and
right.
You know, with all of this debate going on, it has to be in the back of their mind as well.
Well, it has to be, and obviously they need to be trained in order to make those decisions in a split second and in a prudent, wise fashion. And so the discussion's good, but let's make sure that we don't beat up law enforcement, because we want to have our streets and our neighborhoods secure and safe, where schools are places of learning, not violence. And who do you call? You call the cops.
You mentioned Detroit, and Detroit has made real progress, especially downtown.
It's remarkable. You go down there today, and it's just a huge difference, a far cry from what it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
So we certainly would not want to see something happen in Detroit like happened in Baltimore. Are we doing enough in Detroit to prevent that from happening?
Well, you know, I think that I give credit to the state police. I give credit to the mayor of Detroit. I give credit to the chief of police, a guy named James Craig, who does a top-notch job. And I think what everyone is doing in Detroit is engagement, discussion, and wanting to get things better, because we've seen for many years where there was just problem after problem after problem in Detroit. And what have we done now? There's a renaissance going on in the city of Detroit, and I, as a statewide elected official, want to encourage that in every way I can.
You had a role in Detroit's bankruptcy. For one thing, you were protecting some pensions. Are you satisfied with the way the bankruptcy was resolved?
Well, you know, part of my job is, you know, I took an oath to enforce the law and protect and defend the Constitution of Michigan and the United States of America. And we have a clause called the Pension Clause in the Michigan Constitution that said pensions of law enforcement officials and cops and firefighters shall not be impaired. So I made sure that we didn't raid those pension funds, and let people in Detroit make their decision, and make sure we protected the Constitution of the state of Michigan. And that was an important part of my job as Attorney General. And I think we've made great strides. We're moving forward, and I was real proud to be Attorney General, to serve in that way to help Detroit.
Okay, I've got more I want to ask you about. We'll do that in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on the Ryan Report after one more break. Our guest this morning is Michigan Attorney General Bill Schuette. Kind of running out of time, a lot of questions left. Let's deal with some things quickly. The Great Lakes, I know, is one of your concerns. Invasive species, Asian carp, pipelines underwater. What's happening in those areas?
Well, you've said it all, and the key thing, the marker I laid down, is that trying to raise public consciousness that environmental DNA has revealed that we see Asian carp infiltrating into the Great Lakes. And this is an ecological concern, it's an economic concern, a $7 billion tourist industry, 20 million, 20% of the world's fresh water, and we need to make sure that the Great Lakes don't turn into like the Mississippi River, where you see Asian carp all the time. The second issue, big in terms of the environmental issue, is the pipeline. And Director of the Department of Environmental Quality and I are spearheading an effort to review all the safety measures and precautions for the oil pipelines under the Straits of Mackinac. We have a big responsibility environmentally to make sure that we put in place every safety precaution and review what we need to do in the future. And that pipeline task force report will be coming out in about 3 weeks.
Okay. One of the cases where you've joined some other states' attorney generals attorneys general, involved some charity scams, particularly involving cancer.
Yeah.
This is just despicable as far as I'm concerned. These groups have really scammed over $180 million. Will they find justice here?
Yeah, yes, justice will occur, and it really is despicable and disgusting that, you know, people would, under the guise of trying to fight breast cancer, would alter names and encourage people to contribute to try to stop breast cancer, and all they're doing is, you know, putting in their own pockets. You know, you read stories about a cancer survivor who wants to, you know, is saddled with cancer, wants to go to Disney World, and what these people did is they paid their own way to Disney World and fleeced everybody. So I joined with 49 other states, and we sued these shady operators with the Federal Trade Commission to stop this, and we'll make sure that we don't let that happen again.
And certainly one of the unfortunate things is there are many legitimate cancer charities and other charities who are going to be affected by this as well.
There's so many wonderful charities where they pour money in to try to fight cancer research, and these folks are just ripping people off. So, you know, that's part of the consumer protection responsibilities I have as Attorney General.
You know, you do operate in a political arena. You're elected independently. You're not part of the governor's administration, for example. In fact, in many cases, the governor and the attorney general aren't necessarily in the same party, but in this case you are. Politically, do you try to work with the administration to move the state forward and advance the governor's programs as well, or do you see your responsibility as strictly as the Attorney General?
Well, I think we all work together as a team, and the governor has his constitutional responsibilities, and I understand them. I have my constitutional responsibilities. He understands that, and we work together as a team, and I think it's done, actually, we've done a very good job at it. It's the first time in 63 years that there was a Republican Attorney General and a Republican governor at the same time. As you've said, sometimes there'll be a Republican governor, Democrat Attorney General, or vice versa. So this is a road that was not traveled before, and the governor and I get along very well. He's a good guy. We have a strong governor, and, you know, we agree about 95% of the time, which is, you know, about the same average as the best man in my wedding.
That's right.
So I think we're doing okay.
Didn't agree on roads necessarily, except, or at least the solution.
Well, you know, we need to rebuild the roads, but we don't need it with a general sales tax increase. We need to have a dedicated funding source to rebuild the roads in Michigan. Gosh, I know that because I'm on the road all the time across the 83 counties of Michigan.
We have only a minute left. I know you mentioned to me going into the interview that you're going to be meeting with Jeb Bush for a couple of days this week.
Yeah. Well, Jeb Bush is a great guy, and I have a long friendship with the Bush family dating back to when George Herbert Walker Bush, the 41st President of the United States, was running, and I worked for him, came to know his family, and Jeb's a great guy, and one of our outstanding top-tier candidates seeking the Republican nomination for president.
You, as I mentioned at the top of the show, you've served in all branches of government. Just curious, do you have any other ideas in mind on your bucket list before you reach your retirement age? You have been mentioned as a potential governor's candidate in 2018. I know that's a long way off. But
well, you know, time goes like that. I appreciate your encouragement. Great question. Well, you know, time will take care of it. You know, you have to earn this stuff, and I try to earn my responsibilities every day as Attorney General. I guess my bucket list is to come back on the Ryan Report another time.
Very good. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Thanks for joining us this morning. Our guest has been Michigan Attorney General Bill Schuette. I'll have some other thoughts for you when the Ryan Report continues. About a week ago, I had an opportunity to be part of an amazing fundraising effort. The event was Dancing with the Stars Marquette County style, and the beneficiary was the UP Hospice Foundation. My role was one of 3 judges in the competition. I'll have more to say about that in just a moment. What is really amazing is the amount of money that's raised for a wonderful purpose, to help people with special needs who are receiving hospice care. Proceeds are never used for staff or overhead expenses. Every dollar is spent helping families, and the coordinators for this event, which is now in its 3rd year, are Lindsay Hemela and Jeff Nyquist, both with UP Home Health and Hospice. But the real reason the event is successful is because 8 couples are willing to get out of their comfort zone, and I mean way out of their comfort zone, by agreeing to dance in front of 700 people in the Forrest Roberts Theater and a couple hundred more at an overflow venue in the Hedgecock Building. These are not people with any prior dancing experience. They are people who never dreamed they would ever find themselves in this position. Each of them devote countless hours of practice, and I know a lot of anxious, worrisome moments as the big night approaches. But the dancers have even more to do. They lead the fundraising effort by encouraging family and friends to show their support by voting with their donations. They also host many fundraising activities. This year the event raised an amazing $140,000 because of all the people who worked and all of those who donated to the event. Now, the judges for all 3 years have been local television personality Doug Garrison, dance instructor Kristen Frack, and yours truly. I think we make a pretty good team, but it leads to the obvious question, what the heck do I know about dancing? A dancing expert, I'm not. We leave that to Kristen. But I do have a little show business experience, and I can draw some comparisons between the couples as they perform. But the truth is, my primary role has turned out to be someone who adds a little comic relief to the evening, and it's something I've come to enjoy. One thing I've learned about life is that oftentimes we tend to see people we don't know very well in one dimension. We see only one side of them. We see them at work, we see them participating in community activities, we see them in the grocery store. I guess there are a lot of people who have mostly seen my serious side, conducting an interview on a serious topic, serving as a city commissioner, being the spokesman for a large company. I say that because each year after the performance, I hear from more than a few people who say, I didn't know you were funny. You were really funny. And so being part of such a worthwhile project is reward enough. And having some people realize that I do have a humorous side is just icing on the cake. Back in a couple of minutes. We're just about set to wrap it up for this morning. I want to remind you again that this show is also available on the internet. Check it out at uppermichigansource.com. The latest version is usually available starting at about noon tomorrow. And if you have some thoughts you want to share with us, our email address is theryanreport@chesstv.com. I'd really like to hear from you. Our thanks to Attorney General Bill Schuette for joining us this morning. He has some major responsibilities, and we had a chance to talk about some of them today. It was interesting to hear his insights into some of the issues facing Michigan. The Today Show is standing by and anxious to get started, so enjoy the rest of your day, and please join us next Sunday morning.